Just kidding.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, it's just a Kevin's got 1028 here.
To go to church together. And you're Winding Waters. And then there's some. Yeah. We both had it. I don't know. Are these both mine? I brought one over. Yeah, thank you. I'm almost done. Thank you. Second.
I'll call to order the public works session.
Good evening, board members. This evening during the work session, we wanted to share with you information regarding a couple components of Hawthorne's redistricting repurposing plan. One is to look a little more closely at the maps and the information regarding the boundaries that are up for your first read this evening. Again, those are just presented to you in draft form and are not voted on this evening, just informational and beginning to let you know how that's shaking out. So I have Mr. Jay Nacy and Dr. Shepard that I'll call up in a moment to share that with you. And the second is there have been some questions regarding pre-K and what our pre-K levels are in the district and those kind of things. So I have Meredith Warnock and Joe Fairbaum here with us to help explain pre-K, where they're located, those kind of things, and then what would be involved in the repurposing so that you understand that more clearly as well. So, Tony and Brad.
Oh, there, okay.
You're bringing the description.
I could find one if I needed to, but if you have one, thank you. Right.
All right, good evening. Tonight we'd like to talk a little bit about the boundaries that exist currently and the one's current, which was proposed. So the current one is actually this one that's a little more cartoonish. It was on the top, and the proposed is the one underneath. So the one that's up on the screen right now is the current map, and you can see that on the bottom right above the word page, the red area is the current Monger district. The green to its left is the current Hawthorne district. The purple directly above that is the current Roosevelt. The yellow just to the right of that is the current Beck. I'll call it teal. Yellow or light blue to the right of that is Riverview. And then to the left, just above the green, back to the left, past the yellow, that is the current Daly. And the yellow in the middle is Beardsley. So those are the boundaries as they currently exist. So this is our proposed boundaries with the redistricting due to the repurposing of Hawthorne. As you can see, the purple is now Roosevelt. So we absorbed 335 students from the Hawthorne attendance boundary into Roosevelt. The red is the new Monger district. We absorbed 66 students from Hawthorne into the Monger district. The pink to the left, above the purple there, is the Daly area. We absorbed 96 students from Hawthorne into Daly. And then we have some further changes to the boundaries. And you will see in front of you, hopefully you have that handout right now. Yeah. So those were the 6 guidelines we used. And Mr. Scott on the board, you were correct, Dr. Shepard. He led the charge for this. He had to tell us where we could put students. So we worked very closely together to come up with this. But you can see that we actually changed the Beck boundary. Beck was, or is currently, an all-walk school. And in this proposal, Beck would actually expand to the west into an area that was part of Roosevelt. And we did that to be able to move the Hawthorne students, as many of them as we could, into Roosevelt, even in the neighborhood. So Beck's boundary expanded. Inside of that area is Washington Gardens. And we looked very closely at that. And in this proposal, we actually have 16 students that would go to Beardsley. We also have students that would go to Riverview, Monger, and Beck. So the only real change for Beardsley is actually the addition of one of the streets in Washington Gardens. You can see Beck, looking from map to map, changes quite considerably, as does Roosevelt and Monger. The only thing that really changed in Daly is there is a little, we call it the nodule. There's an area just north of the railroad tracks that was ingrained by the river, where it dips down right by that number 24. And we felt that that could be absorbed into Daly quite easily. It made a lot of sense to do that. So that was the change to the Daly boundary.
So as Kathy Skipper and Tony got to work on this, we provided some specific guidelines for them of what our desire was for class size in those schools, based on meetings we had with all of the principals and district leaders on what size schools really should be. With the redistricting, the consensus came down that Hawthorne students would be dispersed so that the new Roosevelt and the new Beck population average class size would be about 20 students per teacher. And the other schools, we wanted to keep the ratios at our current rates that we use when deciding whether or not to post for an additional teacher. So that was quite a task we asked them to do, and we told them also we don't want to have to add any additional teachers to our teacher load with all of our schools, including the 20 general ed classroom teachers at Hawthorne. So if we could spread those teachers across these buildings, then we would not have to hire any additional teachers. So could we draw boundaries with that in mind, where we could keep that student-to-teacher ratio about 20 to 1 at Beck and Roosevelt, and then could we stay within the guidelines for the other schools? that's how these new boundaries came about.
And we work very closely, our team of Dr. Shep and myself and Kathy Skipper, who's in transportation, is our route finder guru.
Really good.
Absolutely. We work very closely to balance the numbers, looking at, you know, as Dr. Shepard said, the number of staff members that we had. So this redistricting proposal represents success in all 6 of the areas that were presented. Finally, in transportation, what we did not want to do was add any routes due to our concerns that we have with drivers as it is. So we feel pretty confident that the 4 buses that currently serve Hawthorne would be used in the redistricting, but we would not have to add any bus routes, any additional buses or bus routes. We could accommodate the areas that were added to the other schools with the buses they already have or with those 4 buses.
Any questions?
How many staff members are out there right now?
In general ed classrooms, there are 20. That does not include special ed teachers, ENL, special teachers like art, music, PE. It does not include that group of teachers, that just includes the number of teachers who have a classroom.
Does that include anybody that has like turned in their resignation? Or
Well,
are you just saying like generally?
That just means how many classrooms we have, regardless of who's in it right now.
Okay, but how many staff members do we have?
How many staff members in total are there right now?
Yeah.
Power School just gave us the numbers of teachers that they have. So if there's a sub in there and the teacher's not replaced, then Power School doesn't do that. I mean, we'd have to go into each individual conversation.
Okay.
For example, we know that there are some grade levels where they have subs.
If we don't, okay, so right now we don't have
So
a teacher.
those positions, yes, and then so both this would have.
Not, if during the work session, we don't have questions. Okay.
Do you mind going over, I'm sorry, I was still getting my bearings, I love math so much, I was like, oh, this is where this is. That's just the way my mind works, I love math, so, I was needing, could you guys go over the numbers again of who would be, switching to where again? Is it written in or somewhere?
Number of students or the number of staff, or both?
Student, I love both. Yeah.
Cover staff. I'll cover student.
Okay. The, 13 teachers from Hawthorne would go to Roosevelt, and the other 7 would go to Beck. The other school teachers, the current teaching load would remain as it is.
Okay, so that switches back to my question, because I don't think I'm answering it right. So how many teachers, we don't know how many teachers right now we have in Hawthorne? Like how many we have right now that would go into the pool if this would happen, that would be applying for a job?
20. Even though there may be an opening right now, that opening would go as well. You know, for example, if there was a teacher who resigned and we have an opening at Hawthorne right now, well, that opening would go
To Roosevelt.
one of those girls that are back there.
Right,
Right, so you're saying there's 13 openings at Roosevelt
Yes.
that will be filled by 13 teachers from Hawthorne.
Exactly.
Okay. But they can repost, right? They can go to the transfer portal, correct?
The conversation we've had is that we would initially place people in those
They're
buildings.
initially going to be placed there, but then they
Right.
can change.
And then,
That could change.
then they
Okay.
could choose to transfer like any other teacher in the district would.
They're not locked in.
They're not locked in.
Right, this is step one. Step one would,
To ensure that those people have a position
Have a position.
and are kept whole in the process of the recruitment.
And I'm not trying to get, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, okay, this is where I'm getting confused. If we don't have enough teachers at Hawthorne right
Right.
now, because we have vacant positions,
Yes.
we're saying that we're putting 20 positions at Roosevelt, or 13.
right,
But if we don't have 13 bodies to go there, then we're in the same situation without, unless we get a new hire. So we don't have a body.
that's right. So in round one, there may be just that scenario that you described, but then the idea is that when the transfer process opens up and postings go up, there would be the opportunity for other teachers in the district to take any open position. And that would be true not only of any current openings, but any of the current Hawthorne teachers who go into the transfer process and decide they're is selected to go to another school.
So when does that open, and when does it close?
Would open in May.
It would open in May.
The
That's when
discussion
the
that Maggie.
transfer process opens up.
Okay, but when does it close? Because at some point you have to have a date to finalize where everybody is gonna go in the whole district, so you know where you're at. So when is that date?
Typically, it's open through much of the summer, but one of the conversations we'd be having would be is, given staffing situations, do we need to look at that differently? But that's a conversation to have with the association. And in looking at how transfers would be handled, some of what was shared at the retreat, like in light of doing that, does that help settle things sooner if that's the route that we go? So those are conversations that we would have to have, but typically that transfer window would be open through much of the summer.
Do you have those conversations like before the end of March, or do you have those conversations, when do you?
As we're having them regarding that transfer process and maybe any changes that we're doing there, that's part of the conversation we're having.
So, okay, so for just the sake of it, so if there are teachers then that they're all placed, the transfer portal opens for everybody in the whole district, everybody's switching around, but if it's opened until the end of the summer, until right before school starts, then how does that affect with all the professional development and team stuff going on during the summer if they haven't been placed in their final spot yet with the normal transfer process?
Well, as part of what we're trying to do in having that solidified would be as people are making the commitments to those buildings and we're looking at the other incentives that would be involved, that would lock them in at that point. But if they ultimately would choose to do something different, then that's part of the process.
And another thing that we face is that we have teachers who retire and resign all the way up till start actually. And so,
Yeah.
so
That
if we
was
were to
another
close
question.
off,
Yep.
if we were to close that off earlier, then, we might be limited where some teachers could actually get hired. So that's why we have to leave it open longer. Because we have to open up known openings that are still going to happen.
Like, this is based on how I saw so much data today. I'm sorry, it doesn't stick in my head super well. This is based on, how many students per teacher at Beck and Roosevelt.
School-wide, it's 20-1. Since we don't quite know how many students are in kindergarten versus 5th grade yet,
Okay.
our goal is to make kindergarten versus 2nd grade range of 18 to 20 students in each classroom. And the other classes, grades 2 through 6, our goal is to keep those class sizes between 20 and 22. The numbers are higher in the rest of the district. And some levels of work. It's different at different age ranges, but in 5th and 6th, for example, I think the range goes as high as 32 in a classroom. So you can see that this is a much smaller
And when,
range.
is the salary that we're trying to renegotiate, is that open for a while through ETA and whomever has to do that, or how?
We'll be having some preliminary discussions about that this coming Friday.
This Friday, okay. So then you'll have a timeline on that, okay, and that'll obviously either help or not, help people's decisions, okay. Oh, not gonna go out to,
So the second part of your question.
oh, sorry, thank you.
That's okay. So the second part of your question is we would move 335 students from Hawthorne to Roosevelt, 96 students from Hawthorne to Daly, and 66 students from Hawthorne to Munger.
How fast is that, reconfiguration, or we're not gonna have people in closets over at Munger if we do this?
No.
I'm just wondering, like,
Sure.
how does that happen when,
Yeah, we don't, based on the numbers we're sending, we don't have to add additional classrooms.
okay.
The class sizes are such size right now that we can increase those class sizes.
What was the number for Daly again?
96.
How much are class sizes increasing at Munger?
I think it takes on average up to 23. And this year, I believe the average class size at Munger is about right now it is.
We should just occasionally have a giant class.
Right, you know, some are going to be larger, but I think they have one class that might have 26. But they have some that have 15.
So it's more like other staff,
Where the 29 is, right?
you know, staff, support staff that are in closets, right?
So Munger right now has,
Good question.
This is not my cup of tea, but I'm trying really hard.
go back to the first thing.
It's a little harder to vote.
I know. So right now, Munger is, current ratio is 20 per classroom.
And that's across, school-wide,
That's
across.
school, right,
Okay.
yeah.
But that's how
And
we kind of fudge sometimes.
that's right. And so
Okay.
then, with the fan, it would go up to 23. So it's about 3 students per classroom more than what we currently have,
How many,
which is still lower than our district, ratios that we have in place for, we need to add more.
how many are going to Beardsley and Riverview?
So Beardsley is 16 students from Washington Gardens, which is actually Roosevelt.
Right.
And I have to look at Riverview, I believe it's 34.
And they're
But they're not
Washington Gardens
Yes.
also.
Yeah, they're not Hawthorne students, they're just.
They're not Hawthorne students.
Right.
No. There was a discussion that we had with members of the community and internally. And so to move them out actually creates even more space for us. Roosevelt was originally designed to hold 800 students. Now that was with a higher classroom count. So with the 20 students per classroom, we can hold 700. And of those, we are keeping an entire section, it's a 5-section building, we're keeping an entire section open for high ability. So Roosevelt can house 560 students. That can house 560 students. So 1,120 students is actually just under the 1,200 students that currently reside in Hawthorne, Beck, and Roosevelt. So we move 96 and roughly 110 out, we create the vacancies within those 2 buildings to be able to shift as we're doing.
So the high ability is not being moved.
No, right?
How many classrooms besides what we have?
No,
They're not being moved right now, they have
2 classrooms.
and then intent is to continue to grow that, you know.
Okay, because the numbers right now are what, 14 in the 5-6, and what is in the 3-4?
What our goal.
Tony, can you come up to the mic so people online can hear you, please?
Because we just have I think it's 14 and 5-6, and like, we get like 3-4.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think about how many we're intending, because as we think about next year, really the look is to try to keep those also at 20 or below in those classrooms. most of the students that will be leaving the 5-6 are not fifth graders, so they will still be there next year as the other kids move up. So the sixth graders are the smaller part of that 5th, 6th. And so we'll see how many folks who are invited choose to attend. That is occurring right now, both at the elementary and the middle school.
How many third graders do we have here?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, I'm sorry, I didn't expect a high-ability question, but that.
You never know.
Yeah, that's right, and that classroom is pretty full.
Okay.
So when I say full, I mean 20, right? Because we're trying to keep those at the same line with 20 students. So I would anticipate that we'll be at that level.
So we've got 2 classrooms right now. What is the anticipate, what's your number of classrooms for your growth?
I would anticipate at least one more classroom.
For each grade, or just
No,
one in total? So just 3 in total?
Altogether, yeah.
Okay.
3 classrooms is what we're anticipating.
It almost looks like a one-room school.
Yeah, and we want to wait until kids are a little older before we separate and do the self-contained classroom. So that's why we did 3, 4, 5, 6 splits. If there are enough students, then you could go to 4 classrooms and have a 3, a 4, a 5, and a 6. Right now, they're being co-educated and then splitting when they're in different levels, right? So the math, it just depends on where you are in math and your ability level at that point. So there is some flexibility within that 3, 4, 5, 6, just depending on the students that we have that are invited and those that choose to come. Because if the numbers are much higher at 3rd and 4th grade level, we'll want to split there. If they're much higher at 5th and 6th grade level, we'll want to split there. But Roosevelt has been extremely welcoming, and those students are definitely part of the fabric of the building, which was the intent, both with Lisa and the principal and math in that building. So they're doing a lot of very cool things.
Other children. So how many buses, you said you had 4 buses currently for Hawthorne?
Yes.
And you'll have, so how many additional, is there any, how many students more will be having to ride a bus versus walk? Is that kind of like too micromanaging this, or?
No, it's a fair question. We just unfortunately haven't been able to get into the weeds that far away at this point.
Okay.
Today I sat with Kathy and answered phone because it's just busy. So we're doing our best. What I can tell you is that when you look at Roosevelt on the map, everything up to Oakland Avenue. Just right there. Everything from that point left will be bused, which it currently is bused for Hawthorne, and there are 43 students in there. So they will continue to be bused.
Okay.
Down at the very bottom near Seminary Drive, but just in the purple, up to your left right there, that is an area that's also bused because it's not safe. There's not a safe way to walk, but that was bused at Hawthorne as well. So we'll continue to bus some of those students, but those are that is a bus route already.
Okay.
So in fact, we will need to bus from Main Street to over, so where you can see the railroad track into that area. So that'll be bused as well. But the other areas we already have buses in. So that area of Roosevelt that was not bused would need to be bused. And that's where we see those 4 buses going into mainly those 2 areas. And until we have the students and we can begin to actually look at the routing, it's difficult to say for sure. So I'm not going to promise you by any means that we won't have more than 4 buses. But right now, it feels good with this layout, with this map, that we can utilize the 4 buses we have and not have to add it.
So the community's concern, I think, also is that having it be a neighborhood deal, if you're going to take these 336 students, 335, and they are going to Roosevelt, is that correct? Are any of them having extraordinarily long walks to Roosevelt versus where they had been walking to Hawthorne? I know they're fairly close.
Well, with the 1 mile non-bus zone that we have, 1 mile walk zone, all of the students that were currently west of Benham to Oakland would walk. There'll be a little additional area, but we're only talking about a 4-block difference between the 2 schools. So we may have more students that get closer to the mile, but we're not going to have anybody walk beyond the mile.
Okay.
And the hazards always come into play. So Lusher's a truck route, so we always take that into account. You know, anywhere we have the railroad tracks, the river, I mean, we always look at what are the best ways to get them to school, the safest ways. And I can tell you, when we first started this, I thought, well, this is great. We're gonna go from back, we're gonna go west a mile, and everybody's gonna walk. Well, then I went out there and drove the underpass. We're not gonna send those kids by foot. We're gonna bus them. Because to get to that underpass, you have to walk from that north side of Indiana. You have to get there, you have to cross to the south side, you have to cross Main Street, you have to walk over, and then you have to cross back over. It's crazy. The sidewalk, if it was on the other side, we might have a chance, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not comfortable with that either. So we will find a way to bus them rather than put them in harm's way when we have those kinds of obstacles, those kinds of hazards.
Okay. We've got to definitely make sure our parents and our staff and everybody knows that you're taking those kinds of precautions with their, all of our precious cargo.
I need a confirmation, on the number of Roosevelt students going to Beck. I think it's 190, that,
Yes, I believe that's right.
Should it be 113?
No, the 190 sounds right.
I don't have, that's what I had on my note that I shared with him, but they wanted to make sure, and that's what I had on the one chart.
So it's in a,
the reason I ask is,
well, and actually, I have to look, because Roosevelt.
No, that's not right. No, that's not right, because you have 335, that's how much you're leaving, right?
Well, but Roosevelt isn't 560
Right.
students right now. So we're adding students because there's capacity. So we're moving students out of Washington Gardens, and we're now at Roosevelt.
how many net,
It's roughly 110,
110?
Yep.
Okay.
roughly. I have to add the numbers.
That helps. I had to put that minus in there, so I was getting
30 are going to Riverview, and 16 are going to.
There's also the Beck number, which I think is 60.
So 60 from Roosevelt are going to Beck.
Going 60 from Washington Gardens, which is Roosevelt.
Roosevelt are going to,
Beck.
okay.
34, if I recall, 34 are going from Roosevelt to Riverview. 16 are going from Roosevelt to Beardsley, and I think it's 26 are going from Roosevelt to Montgomery.
And,
From Washington.
okay, and how many are going from Hawthorne to Beck? Are there any?
Actually, zero.
Zero, okay, that's what, okay, that's
So,
what I wrote, okay.
if I do the math, 335 Hawthorne students are going to Roosevelt. But 190 current Roosevelt students are gonna go to Beck, which leaves a net of 145. Okay? And then if you take out the additional 110 Washington leaving Roosevelt, is it only an increase of 35 students?
To where?
Roosevelt? You have 335 students going to Roosevelt, and then there's 190 students leaving Roosevelt to go to Beck. So that nets out at
Roosevelt changes by 84 students.
84? Okay. That's the number I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. As Dr. Shepard is looking at the enrollment numbers more carefully, we're looking at the route finder, we're trying to come together.
So 84,
Yeah, that's close, that's close.
84 students, okay. That's the number I was trying to get to. So the 13 teachers on a 20-to-1 ratio would be 260 students. But that's accounting for staffing shortages currently in Roosevelt is why we need the 13.
Yes.
So how many students
And to
from
get the
Washington
smaller size.
Gardens are going to stay at Roosevelt?
So where I was going.
Zero.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out too, like, the Roosevelt staffing is like, what, like, when we were with Dee, she said she needed 10.
No, she did it.
13?
Yeah, because Roosevelt will become a 4-section school for each grade level. And right now,
Shoot now, okay.
right
Okay.
now, some grade levels only have 2 teachers at a
Okay.
grade level. And so with more students coming in, then adding 2 more teachers, what that's doing is school-wide right now, the student-teacher ratio is 29-to-1. But by bringing those 13 teachers over and making the shift that Tony talked about, that'll bring that down to 20-to-1. Better in line.
Okay.
And for that, the change there will, currently it's 16-to-1, and that'll move it up to about 20 And Beck is becoming, instead of a 2 teacher per grade level, it's becoming a 3 teacher per grade. That's it today.
If I could just interrupt for Dr. Shepherd and Tony for the moment and allow Joe and Meredith some time so that they could talk pre-K. And then if we can do questions at the end.
Oh,
But
sorry.
no, I want you to get your questions answered, but I also do want to allow them to share information because of the requests and information that people were wanting from pre-K. So.
Hello, my name is Joe Fairboss. I'm on the district team at State Spring School.
I'm Meredith Warnock, I'm the Title I facilitator. And so, together, we realized there were a lot of questions regarding pre-K, the sites, the numbers, and so we came up with a spreadsheet. Each one of you has that in front of you. It's this one. And I basically put down the numbers, of the sites for the past 2 years. And so if you look at, for example, like Hawthorne, Title I, we had 2 classrooms normally. This year we have 1 due to a transfer of a teacher over to the TAP program. Currently, right now, we have 13 students. We combined the 2 rooms when she moved over to TAP. And there are 13 students, a teacher and a para. We have to have 2 people in there based on ratio. Last year, we had 20 students total, 10 per room. At the most, we can have 24 per room. And then it would be a 12-to-1 ratio. So 1 teacher to every 12 students, 1 teacher assistant for every 12 students. We've always capped it at 20 because Head Start has 20 per room. If you continue going down, you have back 6 classrooms that are exclusively Head Start. Right now, currently in 21, 22, there's 89 students. There's 6 teachers and 6 teacher assistants. I want to change that from 3. So total, last year there were 71, this year there is 89. Back Title I, normally we have 3 Title I classrooms. This year we went down to 1. And if you look at the hours, those are the hours, there's 3 rotations of back. This year we have 17 students and they have 1 Title I classroom. Last year we had 35 total, but we had the 3 Title I classrooms going. And they go Monday through Friday, pretty much all the programs go well, except for PACE. ASO, Caesar, Woodland, Bristol, they're 1 classroom buildings for Head Start. The most that they can have are 20 students. To keep that 10-to-1 ratio that Head Start requires among monitoring. Last year there were less students, this year there's more. I think the big reason why the numbers have gone down is because lack of staffing over on Head Start side. And also, a lot of parents opted to keep their children home because of the pandemic. And the fact that they didn't get vaccinations in children under 5. So that's sort of why the numbers have dipped a little bit, but normally the numbers stay pretty much the same.
So when we look at new pre-K programs and what could possibly go into Hawthorne, would be the 6 Mary Beck Head Start classrooms. We would then have 4 Title I preschool classrooms, and then 7 PACE classrooms. PACE is our developmental delayed classrooms for students with special needs.
Hawthorne Title I would also
Right.
stay there. At Hawthorne, yes.
With the back home.
And we would go back up to the 2 classrooms that we normally have had. So we would add an additional pre-K teacher, an additional para. But since it was late in the school year, we sort of just combined the students. And so that 1 classroom has 13 students right now.
So then looking at PACE, we actually are at 2 sites this year. We're at the Career Center at Mary Beck. We have 2 classrooms at Mary Beck, and we have 3 at the Career Center. We are in need of 2 additional classrooms because we are growing at a pace. Last year we were about 185 students. This year we're at 237 total. I have 31 staff members that help support all of our special needs kids through speech language pathologists, OTs, PTs, PARAs, RBTs, and then we have our 6 special ed teachers as well. So we are growing and we need more space for the pace side, so.
And some of the Head Start students and some of the Title I students that are in pre-K are also PACE students.
Yeah, so we see this as a good collaboration with me and Meredith and allowing some of our PACE students to go into Head Start classrooms or Title I classrooms, because currently PACE is not utilizing those, instead of we utilize community preschools. So having the connection and us there together would be able for us to push all of our kids who need more inclusive practices into a Title I classroom. And then we'd have all the support staff there for the speech to the teachers and so on. Any other questions?
Okay, so can you go over again, which ones are Head Start classrooms? You said Beck is all Head Start.
So it's
Except for the 7, you've got 89 at Beck that are Head Start and 17 that are just your regular Title I?
Correct.
Okay, so what other schools are Head Start schools?
Any of those with HS in parentheses.
Easter, Woodland, Bristol.
Oh, okay.
And then Washington Gardens is a site that they opened that probably a year or 2 ago.
Okay.
And the only connection we have with Washington Gardens is food service. So our food service, Pam Melcher provides the food for that program, but it's essentially ran completely by Head Start. We do not have bus transportation there. We do not have any employees from the district there other than if they need evaluated for an IP. But last year we had 3 Title I, 6 Head Start at Beck, so total we had 9. We've never gone down to 7. The reason why we went down to 7 was because lack of staff, and then we had parents that chose this year. But we have enrollment days coming up for Head Start and PACE, and I think those numbers will grow.
Can you tell us
A
about
lot more will be interested.
Can you tell us what happens at enrollment days? What does that mean? Is that the best way for you to let people know that what you do?
What I do?
Yeah, what's available for these students? How do we get more students in these programs?
Well, Head Start does advertise on TV. We put out communications regarding Head Start enrollment. The Parent Expo that's on March 26th. They're handing out flyers that will have all the dates listed. So there will be enrollment dates here that I arranged with Rebecca Thompson. There are enrollment dates at Beck, and of course those are in the evening hours. And then possibly I just need Title I offering as well, Title I. So we send out flyers throughout all the elementary schools to all the students, and they also advertise on TV. Head Start's actually pretty good about that. They send a lot of flyers and they send out a lot of communication, a lot of emails. Those that are returning, I think they're already doing their enrollment right now.
When do you
The
sign
ones that are returning.
When do you sign letters?
Do they have my number?
No, when you sign it, like, when do you know, when do you have an idea of what your needs actually would be for next year? So we don't really have an idea of what the needs are until July.
Well, with IEPs and student needs, if there's 3 or 4 and they're gonna continue the program for Head Start, you already know what their needs are. If it's a new student coming in, sometimes the IEPs follow them. If there's a need, they do a need analysis in their packet. Head Start does a thick, I'm more than happy to share with you guys, a thick packet that gives all the information about intervention services. There's requirements for parents to participate.
in evening, programming. There's also a certain number of meetings that parents have to, conferences they have to attend every year. I think it's 4 per year. Semester. So there's a lot more information that they're able to give outside community information, community resources they can also provide. But those dates, they're coming up big. We have 2 in March. We have 2 in March already planned, 2 in June, and 2 in April for students for next year. Okay.
Yeah.
And Title I students have started to take, students have always gone through the enrollment process through Head Start, so that we're not double dipping in that pool of pre-Kers.
So you don't, when you know how many, like, incoming new students, like, you know how many you're keeping by the end of the year, you know how many are staying or moving on, then when do you get your number of what your, you know, total number of students for the year are going to be?
I think maybe June, end of June, they can give me a rough guess, beginning of July. A lot has to do with, and transportation sort of changed this year for Head Start. There's only Title I that's using busing. But if we use busing for Head Start, I think we use it anyways, we have to get those kids routed in the month of June and July. So everything sort of hangs on the routing.
Okay.
All my students are bused because they're special ed students, so they get transportation.
And Title I Hawthorne is bus, and Title I FX also this year.
And as far as our enrollment goes, it's been increasing, and we get most of our referrals from doctors' offices. So I gave you one of our nifty, handy-dandy little pamphlets that, talks about developmental delay and things, and these are things doctors give out to their families and stuff if they believe in developmental delay or some sort of additional need is given for the students. We also have, our speech-only classes where we have kids who come in one day a week and receive speech and language services as well. So our numbers are always growing. There's still about 30 pending evaluations for the school year.
So can you share why the numbers grow throughout the year and after?
Yeah, because once they turn 3 years old, they're no longer a first step student. They become a PACE student. So we start services for 3-year-olds. So first steps refers also to students that were identified from birth to age 2. And any of those students who then have special needs will then be transferred over to PACE. So then our numbers increase throughout the school year, just as first aid and other things come along. So we have a lot of parents who don't realize their son has a delay or something, and then when a friend tells them, and they come in and we evaluate them, and they're in our class, So.
Head Start and Title I, same thing. Like it's an ongoing enrollment. So once they're enrolled and we have slots, then the children are placed in classrooms. There is a waiting list, so if the classroom fills up for Title I, for example, so all those Title I classrooms are filled up, then they're put on a waiting list. Same with Head Start.
You guys cap at 20 as well?
Me,
Or 12-to-1 ratio, or not?
Title I at Hawthorne, any Title I can be ages 4 to 5.
Okay.
So they can have 24 students per room.
Oh.
So then they can have that 12-to-1 ratio where, 12 students for each adult. Head Start is 10-to-1 ratio, so they only cap it at 20. That's why we sort of capped it at 20 for Title I pre-K, just so.
So I got a question that kind of goes back to what we talked about before. So with the 190 Roosevelt students going to back, we need the 11 pre-K classrooms at back to house those students.
Yeah, but
Right.
we have to go somewhere. So yeah, we have 2 classrooms right now. In Title I has 1 and 6 at Head Start for all back. So
You said, yeah, normally there's 3, but it's like 10, 11.
Actually, they have probably 7 classrooms. And then there's smaller rooms, and then there's middle part for training among the teachers.
Yeah.
Basically, the hall, that one side of the building would just be open, just the normal K through 6th grade level.
chance of you requiring more space? And, once you got over there, or would that satisfy your needs, you think, for a while? If you have waiting lists, what's your thoughts on?
I think it just depends on enrollment. Like I said in the past, we have manufacturers go back, the students have done the setup. So if we find that there's long wait lists, Kathy Butterharder, the head cert director, would probably explore talking to us about opening up other classrooms. I guess it just depends on what classroom.
Do you guys have anything else in your presentation that you wanted to, like?
I'm trying to think if there's. Do you have any questions for us?
You're liking this idea? You like the fact that your paid students could,
So we've never been, my team has never been together.
yeah,
And so when we did our school culture audit by Alex, he came in and said one of our major flaws was the fact that we're at two sites. Because our collaboration and team bonding is not there because the other programs feel isolated. They have 2 classrooms and we have 3, but we have all the support staff and everybody is housed at the career center. So it's always been the great divide, and so having us all together and then having right down the hallway access to gen ed classrooms for preschool would be amazing with, you know, our focus for special ed on inclusion. So, our big push is to have kids included as much as we can. And so if there's a Title I preschool that I can walk my kid down to, they can be included and still get special ed services from the teacher of record who just has to walk down the hallway instead of driving from the career center to Calvary now, it would, you know, be way more time efficient, more collaborative for the students, so.
and that opens up 3 classrooms at the career center, or 3 areas for potential, the other program that we would have, which would be for helping to.
The TAP program?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
So we're in space right now.
All my acronyms,
Yep.
they're running together. Okay, thank you.
So I invite you guys to come to PACE if you want to check it out, see exactly what we are. My phone number's on the back, you can call and set up a time to come and see the little kiddos and what exactly we do. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you for your coming in and explaining what you guys are doing.
Do you guys have any other questions? All right, we'll take a 10-minute break and we will resume the regular board meeting at 7. Okay, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. If everybody wants to take a seat, please. Well, give me a second, I was talking about the people in the hallway. If everybody wants to stand up for the pledge of allegiance. Martin Davis, give me a chance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have an invitation to speak protocol, so if anybody would like to speak, we have the opportunity at the end of the meeting. There is a white paper, should be on your seat. If it's not, Doris has one. You just need to fill that paper out and you'll get 3 minutes to speak at the end of the meeting. Kelly, do you want to say the Elkhart Promise?
The Elkhart Promise. Every student is known by name, challenged and supported by highly effective staff, and in partnership with the community, will graduate career college ready and life ready.
Thank you. So, Dan, are you ready for the moment of pride?
Mr. Burton, you are a moment of pride. You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Dan Burton. I'm one of the band directors at Cameron Middle School. And it would be a great pleasure tonight to come and kind of give some light, give some publicity to a program that's been occurring in our district for about 2.5 years that no one knows about. But it's amazing, the partnership we have with the Elkhart Municipal Band and Grace Lutheran Church. Originally, about 2 years ago, we had two people that approached me and said, hey, would you be interested in having some private teachers come in and teach your kids and get the lessons for free once a week? And I said, that would be absolutely amazing if we could do that. And the two people, actually, Candy and Craig Tinkler, who are here tonight, or Candy is here tonight. Candy, if you can stand up here, we'll recognize her. And then also, Dean Ferguson from the Elkhart Municipal Band. I've asked Dean to come forward and tell about how the program started just a little bit. So Dean, if you want to come forward.
Thank you. You probably know the municipal band's been a large part of the music community in Elkhart for 85 years. The city supports the band to a degree. We're able to pay our members a little bit, not much, just gas money, but it's been operating for a long time with very stable membership. But about 10 years ago, a gentleman who had played in the band previously passed away. He'd moved to Tennessee in the meantime, passed away, and left the band kind of a significant amount of money. So we formed a not-for-profit corporation and deposited the money with the Elkhart Community Foundation. And when the grantable funds were sufficient, we started supporting the 3 Elkhart City School band programs at the Central, Memorial, and Concord, helping them with their financial budget each year. And that went on for several years until about 5 years ago, a lady who had played in the band 50 years passed away, and she had no family, and she left us an even more significant amount of money. So that money, too, was added to our balance at the Community Foundation. And again, as the funds built up, we were casting about looking for a program to assist. Well, about that time, after one of our summer Tuesday evening concerts, Candy Hinkler approached me after the concert and said she and Craig, her husband, would like to chat with me. So I went out to their house and discovered that they attend, and had for a long time, the Lutheran Church on what street's that on? Right. And there have been some youth violence in the neighborhood, and they were thinking, how can we stop this? How can we change it? They thought, well, we could build a fence around the church, or we can try to change the community. And the tool in their hand was music. Craig had played in the band in high school, and Candy had played in the municipal band as she was still teaching piano. So they started collecting instruments, and by the time I chatted with them, they had collected and had refurbished about 40 instruments. And they developed a program to give these instruments to young people in the community that they thought could not afford to buy an instrument. The only deal they made with the child was you can have it if you keep playing it. And if you continue through high school, you can keep the instrument. And as a little bit of time passed, they realized that that from their own experience, you need private and focused, one-on-one instruction if you're gonna play an instrument very well. So that's where she came to me. She knew that the municipal band was about half full, really, of current and retired band directors and educators. So the idea was formed, and we started working on it, and Dan got involved, and we finally, in the fall of 19, we put the program together, and we started the first batch of students in January of 2020. There were 10 students, and the deal was we could use the classroom space at the Lutheran Church, and the Lutheran Church also would supply chaperones. There'd always be a chaperone in each room with the teacher and the students. And Dan would supply the students, and we would supply the professional and instructors and pay them. And that's how it's gone. Of course, we got started that first semester, and COVID shut us down then after that year, if you're aware. And we were shut down for a year and a half because of COVID. And we successfully restarted now in January. We're on a second batch now of 10 students. And it's going very well. It's managed well by a lady from the band. And we expect that we'll be able to expand the program a little bit more next year as funds continue to grow. From my perspective, I think the Hinklers had a brilliant idea in when they thought that music could be a tool to change the community a little bit. And I've always been thankful for their foresight in that matter. Any questions about what we're trying to do with this whole thing?
Fantastic.
I thought so too, as soon as they had the idea. Anyway, thank you for hearing the story.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Yeah, that's
We also have just a few clips from the program. This is basically an outline that he discussed. We do have 10 students that are committed to the program. We require each kid to sign a commitment agreement to show up regularly and have a parent or guardian to transport them to and from lessons. That's been the biggest challenge we've found, because a lot of our kids are high need. Parents don't have access to a car all the time, but we've been doing pretty well with getting the majority of our kids there every lesson. So this year we have 3 outstanding teachers working with our students. We have Vicki Marshall, Steve Allen, and Janine Billick. And here's a picture of Vicki in action last night. And I also have a short video, about 20 seconds. And so we have another teacher, Steve Allen. Here he is with one of our brass students. So they get the one-on-one instruction each week, which is just amazing. They don't get that usually with our band program. And we have one short clip here. If you notice, we do have an adult in each room, and the adult is there supervising as well. It's been a fabulous program, and the kids have done just a great job working with them. We also have one of our students here tonight who came with us, and we're going to ask Paige if she could come up here. This is Paige Van Evel, and she's a 7th grader at Pierre Moran Middle School. And I asked her to maybe tell us a little bit about if she enjoys the lessons and how they go.
They are very fun, and it has made a big improvement in our playing. All of the 10 students who have played, about 5 of them are in 7th grade, and they have gotten so much better than the program. Including me, because she helps me with the Yeah, it's just really fun overall.
Paige, what instrument do you play?
Oh, I played the flute.
She was the flute player.
She was the
That-
flute
Oh, she
player.
was in the
That was the,
video.
that was her.
Tell.
The big ponytail.
Yeah, that was her.
She did not in a ponytail.
She did really good.
Yeah. Thanks.
That was awesome.
You turn around and so she can recognize you.
That was her. Yeah.
Any questions?
Are you glad you picked the flute?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
It's a very beautiful.
it is.
Yeah, very nice tone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you gonna march?
Maybe.
We'll work on
About that,
that.
Jeff.
All right, I'll
Hey,
slow
great
it down,
Paige.
slow it down. Thanks,
Good
Paige.
job.
And I was speaking with Dean beforehand, we've talked about this. We're really pleased this year's program and looking forward to expand it for next year. But it's gonna be minus one older band director who's retiring, so. But we're gonna have some new people come in and I'm sure this program will continue to expand and just take off. But really appreciate Dean, Candy, and all the other people that helped make this program a success.
Dan, will you have like the players play at Grace Lutheran or something so that the church or the public can see, you know?
We haven't done that in the past, but, that's a great idea. I can talk with Candy and maybe we could possibly set something up in the future.
Well, if you do, please let the board know, because I'm sure we'd like to be there.
Do you have the capacity to take more students?
Right now, we set the limit at 10. Next year, we're expanding hopefully to about 15, is that correct? Yeah. And, also incorporating more schools. So we started a pilot program at Pierre Moran and now we're trying to expand some of the other, schools.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, we have our consent items. Is there a motion? Is
So moved.
Second.
there any discussion?
Okay, gift acceptance, the ECI building, again, Bob and Amy Martin, $25,000. Gift acceptance for the music department, a, rock violin and bow to the music department. The violin is $500 and the bow is $400 from Dale Phillips. And then we have from Catherine Freehaver, a violin that is a fair market value of $750 to the music department. Chemcrest donated miscellaneous supplies for the automotive program, and that's $4,500. So that's Brian Oaks at Chemcrest. And then donation to NEVA from NEVA. So donation from NEVA to NEVA, 10,000. And then, Passionately Purple for the track program, the Sarah Crane Foundation, a donation of 1,000. Excellent, thank you again to our community.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Judge Thorne, you're up.
Evening. We've got a lot of policies on the agenda, both new policies, some revisions to, policies that have been previously presented to the board, as well as, a little bit in terms of an administrative regulation for your consideration. The first item on the agenda would be proposed revisions to the student concussion and sudden cardiac arrest policy. We have, attempted in response to questions that were raised by the board members during your February 22nd meeting to make some revisions to the policy so that it reads a little bit more clearly and kind of separates out the requirements in terms of sudden cardiac arrest and concussion. Now, I will tell you that the copy of the policy that you have, because it moves parts and pieces all over the place, is a little bit difficult to follow. That's the fault of Word docs, not Dora. But the the intention was to really differentiate and separate out, the expectations in terms of training for sudden cardiac arrest, or actually those students that might be, exhibiting symptoms of sudden cardiac arrest, as well as students who might be exhibiting symptoms of concussion. One of the changes that we did make was to make it clear that there is a 24-hour waiting period, both for students who experience a concussion as well as those students who might have symptoms that would indicate possible risk of sudden cardiac arrest. That in both of those situations, the student would be removed from participation in play or practice for a minimum of 24 hours before they would be returned. You'll also find enclosed in your packet copies of materials that are provided to parents and students prior to signing the acknowledgement form for sudden cardiac arrest. We think that helps to address the issue of whether or not parents have really informed consent as to what are the expectations in terms of sudden cardiac arrest. Those will be provided to parents prior to executing that form, which is also included in your packet. And we are seeking your approval of that policy as revised this evening.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, there's a couple clauses in there, they're the same, unless the student is at least 18, years of age or is an emancipated minor.
Yes.
Why would, just because a kid's 18, I'm assuming if he's in our school corporation, he's gonna have parents. And
Why 18? Because at age 18 in the Indiana Code, the decision-making authority transfers to the parent, to the student at age 18.
Right, okay, I
Now, that
understand
doesn't
that.
preclude parents being involved in the decision-making process, but from a legal standpoint, that decision-making process at that point in time transfers to the student.
It seems to me like you would go ahead and notify the parents anyhow, because if I was a parent and I had a kid here that was 18, I would expect them, I don't care how old that kid is, you're still a parent.
Right.
And, if there's something that is, that serious,
We can certainly add in language indicating that the notification would go to both the parent and the student. That would not be a problem. It's the decision-making authority that after age 18 rests with the parent. But notification, I don't see that would be a problem.
yeah, notify, as long as they're notified, if the kid wants to sign off on it or whatever, I'm good with that. Do we have a policy on where the defibrillator units are placed?
We do have we have a whole policy. I can't tell you what it is off the top of my head. I know that when we first passed it, it was board policy AEDS. That's before we changed to the Neola numbering, but yes, we do have a policy related to that particular issue. And actually, in all of our buildings, we have individuals who are responsible for checking on those pieces of equipment on a daily basis. I know, for example, human resources, that's always been a responsibility of the receptionist to check on that piece of equipment on a daily basis. I know that also the AEDs that are utilized by the athletic departments are monitored by our trainers.
Okay. And my last question on this was that, it appears from what I got from prior state law was that, intramural sports were included.
So we might have to look at that. I don't recall looking at the statute that speaks specifically to what the Indiana Department of Education makes reference to. Again, we can expand the scope of this beyond what state law requires, but the policy as presented only focuses on what state law obligates, which, to my knowledge, is band and athletics, but doesn't necessarily make reference to intramural athletics. But certainly there again, there'd be no problem expanding the scope of the policy.
Well, what I was pointing to was the frequently asked questions, number 5.
Yeah.
About students participating in intramural sports. Yeah, they did change the law in 2016. So before that, were we?
Before that, we would have. You're right. Before that, we would have required concussion removal from athletics, from intramural athletics. Of course, at 2016, our intramural programs were not particularly extensive. But I know that as with the merger of the high school, that's something that there's been a lot of discussion about beyond the scope of what the law requires, that's something that the board, as the local decision-making authority, has the ability to do.
I think it does refer to intramural sports activity. Under, students studying cardiac arrest, the board also directs and requires before beginning practice for an interscholastic or an intramural sports activity, cheerleading, marching band, or other extracurricular activities with students. I think it
Also, yes, okay.
It does refer to it.
I have a question, and Troy, you might be the man to answer this. Doug's concerned about letting the parents of an 18-year-old know what's going on. Could that be a violation of the HIPAA laws?
It could be.
Could be.
Yep.
So we need to check on that before we, so that we know that we're not violating any federal statutes.
Fortunately, what federal law says about HIPAA is that what is the prevailing authority under in schools is still FERPA. But there again, that is FERPA protected information, so I guess the question comes to play whether or not that student who's over age 18 has given us the consent to notify parents.
Right.
So, you raise an excellent point there. You would have gotten some points on your school law exam.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Is there any other discussion?
What's the pleasure of the board in terms of the issue of notification? Would you like to put something in there, but I think we have to be very careful about how we craft the language, so that we don't turn around and violate for something.
Right. I would like to see something in there, if you feel you could.
I'm more than happy to see if we can craft something that will deal with that particular issue. I'll work with the athletic department on that. We've been working closely with Buck and Jackie throughout the process of developing and making the changes to the policy, as well as Kyle Wire in his department.
Okay.
So we can continue to work on that particular policy, and bring that back to you 2 weeks from now.
Very good.
And our conversation about intramural sports there, it seemed to me like it was like a little, kind of wobbly.
On that issue there as well.
It's kind of wobbly, you know, we could firm that up, it'd be a good idea on either we are or we are not.
Well, again, I think that would be up to the decision of the board as to whether I want to expand the scope of the policy to cover intramural.
I think it does.
Well, I think it's
There's several times.
Well, I'm just looking at the FAQ from May 2021. Under state law, it's not covered.
Correct.
Under our policy, it can. That's what I was just trying to clarify that.
I think it's
no problem.
And it says or other extracurricular activities, so.
Other extracurricular activities as identified by ID. That's really my the issue there.
Yeah.
IDE has not included
okay.
intramurals. We
Gotcha.
as a school corporation.
And it calls it out specifically in the first paragraph under student concussion.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll clarify.
Yeah, just clarify that.
Yeah.
So do we not need to vote since you're
I think
gonna
we'll bring it back for further consideration in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comments. I'd like to get this right for us, for all community schools, rather than worry about whether it's right for the Department of Education.
So we have a motion and a second.
So, excellent. What,
I'd like to make a motion to table.
you want to postpone consideration?
Postpone consideration,
To a date certain, which is,
to an uncertain date.
no, to a date certain.
2 weeks from today, which is March 22nd.
Yes, I would make that motion.
Well,
I would second that motion.
All right, good.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
thank you. Nice job, Mr. Enfield. 2 more points to the Enfield team for.
Oh, my.
It's gonna be a banner night.
Oh, my.
All right, moving on. The next policy, our proposed revision to 5540, which is, schools and governmental agencies. As you might recall, this really deals with notification of parents within child protective services or law enforcement comes to interview a student. Try to make the changes that, were matters of concern to the board. Number one, as I recall, was the concern that, was raised by the board as to who would be the representative who would be participating in those interviews. We've clarified that language to indicate that it would be principal, guidance counselor, or a social worker who would have the ability to be present as a school representative, and also define that so it's clear that it's a school representative. And the other change was to make it clear that we would make every reasonable effort to inform the students' parents
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Okay, when you say parents, does that include, like, if they have a guardian ad litem, if
Absolutely.
they have, I mean, that,
That
just the word
includes,
parent.
Karen, if you go back and look at your bylaws, you'll see that in the bylaws very specifically say, parent means the following people. So,
So that covers
absolutely,
everything.
it would cover a guardian,
Okay.
absolutely. Now, it wouldn't necessarily cover a court-appointed guardian,
That's what I was wondering.
but in a situation such as that, we might want to take into consideration that person or have an obligation to report to that person.
If it was
Typically,
foster care.
foster parent certainly would fall within the scope of that, under the current definition. The guardian ad litem officer would really depend upon what the court has ordered in terms of the level of participation of that individual. But I'll point this team on that question.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The next item would be board policy 7540.03, which is network and internet accessible use safety policy. This is presented to you as it was initially presented during the February 22nd board meeting. Seeking your approval of that this evening.
So moved.
Good grief, Doug, slow down.
Well, you have to have a motion.
I know you didn't let me say, is
Oh,
there a
I'm sorry.
motion? Is there a motion?
No. I make a motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion? No discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Next, in the area of new business, are proposed revisions to Administrative Regulation JC. These are the proposed boundary changes that would take effect were the board to move forward and approve the proposed repurposing of Hawthorne School to a pre-kindergarten early childhood education center. As you know, this is being brought tonight for merely initial consideration, not for any board action. The proposed boundary changes would impact the following elementary buildings: Mary Beth, Beardsley, Mary Daly, Hawthorne, Munger, Riverview, and Roosevelt. Again, for merely initial consideration, as you well know, this is the subject of a presentation during the work session.
And one other addition relative to the email response that I sent to you was that we're aware of pages 18 and 19 still reflecting the boundaries from the former two high schools, so we will work on getting that condensed into one.
Questions? And we'll bring that back for further consideration. Which brings us back to some other policies. The first policy would be 3422.06S, that's the Secretarial Business Compensation Plan. We are asking that you waive second reading on this policy. This policy would reclassify the position of executive assistant to the assistant superintendent for student services to a class 5 secretary for that position. As we know, the incumbent executive assistant is about to retire, and I know that Serena Stevens very much like us to post this position as class 5, so we are seeking approval of that policy change this evening, and we will wait a second reading.
It's green copy in front of you.
It's a green copy. My apologies for, well, it's in the electronic packet, but you probably did not see that because a few of us, including myself, didn't recognize it wasn't included in the packet until this morning. But they want to move forward with that.
Initial consideration right now.
So next, let's wait second reading.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Can you restate, what's going on with this again?
Okay, presently, the executive assistant for student services is retiring.
Okay.
The request is to reclassify that position not as an executive assistant, which is an exempt employee position, but as a class 5 secretary, which is a non-exempt position.
Okay.
What is the, do we need to?
Hold on a second,
Yeah,
hold
we
on,
need
we've had one motion, we've had a motion, so you need a second before discussing further.
Okay, did you hear that, Dora? And second.
And seconded.
Now, is there a discussion?
Okay, what's the point of this?
The point of this is to reduce the number of executive assistants, and the decision was on the part of the superintendent of that department that we did not need as an executive assistant. It makes it similar in terms of, if you look at exceptional learners department, there is a class 5 secretary who is the secretary to the assistant superintendent for exceptional learners, so it equalizes those two departments in terms of class 5 secretaries rather than an executive assistant.
Is there a big pay difference?
There is a pay difference, yes. And in addition to the pay difference, there is the difference in terms of the fact that position is reclassified would be eligible for overtime. The exempt position would not have been eligible for overtime.
What's the benefit for junior, from a 4 to a 5?
Oh, it was never a 4.
Okay.
It was in the past, before, so if we go back in time, for many years, the secretary to, at that point in time, student services, which as you recall, means both exceptional learners and student services, was a 4-6. During Dr. Hayward's tenure, the decision was made to elevate that position to an executive assistant position. Subsequent to that date, the department has been divided into 2 separate departments, and the intent here is to kind of equalize the compensation for the clerical support for those 2 departments as a class 5 secretary, rather than one department having an executive assistant and one department having a class 5 secretary.
Which one's more highly compensated?
The executive assistant, more highly compensated, has a slightly different benefit package than the secretary. 20 years ago, it was a much richer benefit package for executive assistants, but as those individuals have retired, it has less, the differential between the two of them in terms of compensation has diminished. We've also eliminated, as you might recall, executive assistants in a number of other departments. In the past, there were 2 executive assistants in the business office. Both of those positions have been eliminated in terms of executive assistant. One was converted to an administrative position. One was reduced in terms of level compensation to a 3.6. In addition, there was an executive assistant to the superintendent, which going further back in time was an executive assistant to the superintendent and the board of school trustees. That position was eliminated, actually right about the same time that Mr. Mao finished his tenure as the interim superintendent and has not been replaced with an executive assistant. So that would reduce the number of executive assistants to 2 operating in the superintendent's office and 1 operating in human resources.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, just really quick. So when you say they have the opportunity to gain overtime, like how do you have a check and balance on like the appropriation of that?
The appropriation of overtime. Overtime per board policy is to be approved prior to an employee getting overtime by the chief financial officer. So, for example, if Sarita needed to have somebody work overtime to complete a project, she would go to Kevin in advance, unless of course an emergency, and make a request like every other administrative position would for that person to earn overtime for that time worked with the employee. Right now, if that person works overtime, they're not entitled to any compensation. Now, that doesn't preclude us from, for example, offering comp time to somebody, but we have no obligation to do so.
So there's a check and balance.
Yeah, there is.
Is there any other discussion?
Yes, I will abstain as my wife falls within the secretarial board.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
one more policy that we'd like to waive second reading on, and that is the leave of absence policy for administrators. As you recall, we began to make some changes to that policy, bring it in line with the Teachers Association. The draft that was previously presented to the board did not fully do that, which is why we are making another minor revision to that policy to address that particular issue. That's 3430.01, and that is to replace the current language which provides an unused personal leave days at the end of the contract year would be transferred in whole into sick leave, and replacing that with language which would allow administrators to accumulate days up to a maximum of 10 days over a period of time. The approval of that policy change this evening, and that should be waived right second reading.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Finally, for initial consideration, bringing a proposed new policy, which would be a family care leave policy. The purpose of this family care leave policy is to provide a mechanism that would allow for unpaid leave for employees of up to 30 days. And this is primarily directed at employees who would have no other option to take time off for a new child, for the birth of a new child or a member of the immediate family who might be infirm and in need of care from a family member. This policy really covers that gap that exists between those employees who would traditionally be entitled to family medical leave, any other type of leave, and really focuses on those employees which are typically less than 4 hours a day, less than 20 hours a week, who have no leave opportunities available to them. Cafeteria employees would be the first ones to come to mind as falls within that classification. So our intent is to allow those employees to be able to take some unpaid time off without being placed in a situation where, by virtue of the fact that we're having the leave options available for them, we're asking them to actually resign their position and then reapply for a position at a later point in time. So we're bringing this to you merely for initial consideration this evening and for your input and thoughts regarding this new policy.
I have a question or a comment. Is it capped at 30 days?
It's capped at 30 days, but does allow for renewal for an additional 30 days.
Okay, and then how many additional increments can you do?
As drafted, one additional 30-day increment, so the maximum available would be 60 days.
What I would like to see in here is that I think it says that it has to be consecutive time. Some people who are caring for loved ones only need part of a day covered. So is it a possibility to add that in there to where if they only did half days or something, if they had caregivers or whatever, they could cover part of it?
We could certainly, we intentionally did not include intermittent care in that because it becomes much more difficult to manage in terms of that, but it doesn't, certainly if that's the will of the board to include intermittent use of that leave, I think that would be an option that would be available for us to add that to the policy, but it does become much more difficult to administer a policy. We have this challenge already with family medical leave in terms of keeping track of all of those days of intermittent leave. But again, these are your policies, so if that's what the consensus of the board is to include that in there, we can certainly do that.
But I think you said the policy was kind of geared towards people who might work 4 hours a day anyhow.
That really is the focus, Mr. Weaver, but there are other times as well where, under the Family Medical Leave Act, before an employee is eligible, they have to work 1,250 hours in the 12 months prior to the event of this leave. And again, sometimes for our school year employees, it's difficult for them to hit that threshold as well. So that's something that could avail themselves of this policy. If you'd like us to look into or at least think of how the intermittent leave provision might work, we can do that.
Maybe we could narrow it down to the 2-week blocks or some other than daily.
Yeah, I think it will be beneficial to at least explore.
And I think, as Mr. Scott raises a good point, I think if we did it, again, it was a manageable block of time,
Right.
rather than an hour here or an hour there, it becomes much more easy for us to manage something like that. And especially for these short hour employees, I think the likelihood that they would each do an hour here and an hour there probably is lessened from the standpoint that they are working typically maybe, some of these folks may be working 1.5, 2.5 hours a day. So from that standpoint, it may be easier for them to work around and interview needs than other employees. So we'll take a look at that.
Well, I was thinking more of the other group that wouldn't be these part-time people, like the
You're
people
thinking
who
of
haven't
the
qualified,
two-year
but,
employee
right,
who
so
doesn't.
what about half-day increments or something like that?
Yeah,
So that,
we'll take a look at that. I want to work with payroll on that because they'll eventually be the people who are going to have to track that. And I really like to keep those folks happy.
Yeah.
Which is personally a selfish reason on my standpoint, because they do have something to do with getting paid every month. But we'll take a look at that. How we might make that work.
This is, up to 30 calendar days,
Yeah.
on a rolling 12 months.
Yes. Now, from that standpoint, we tried where possible to try to mirror the concept of family medical leave.
FMLA.
So it'll be a very similar in nature to that, but also intentionally use family care leave, make it clear that it is not family medical leave. It is different from that.
so what happens after the 60 days? Then they are,
After the 60 days, I think if that would probably be a situation where we might actually say to that person, you need to step out of the position and resign. But as things stand today, very frequently we have opportunities for them to return. And I think our goal is to not create, which has existed in the past, situations where employees could be on an unpaid leave because we sought that approval from the school board. It might be multiple years. So it's really trying to establish some sort of fixed, reasonable time. The 30 days was somewhat arbitrary in terms of coming up with a number. It was a start for us to look at that particular issue. So we'll do a little bit more research on this and bring it back for further consideration.
okay, thank you, Doug.
Comments and questions? Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so the board has previously taken action for projects at Longer and Daly. Tonight, we're addressing the finance piece of this. We're required to have a hearing. Posted notice is required by Indiana Code 204739. And so, as you recall, we're doing a variety of freshening work at both those buildings to include significant roof replacement, replacing lighting, we're going with LED lighting, which will save utility dollars for the district, new paint, flooring in major areas of both those buildings, restroom renovations, and so what we're required to do is take any public comment during the hearing, and I forgot, Madam President, to ask you to suspend the regular meeting and open the hearing.
I was gonna wait till you called, so we'll go ahead and suspend the meeting and open up the 1028 hearing.
So with that, again, significant improvements to the two buildings. There is not another funding source without going this route and issuing bonds. The bonds are issued by the building corporation. The building corporation took action at noon today, and we will take corresponding action. There's two resolutions following the hearing for action by the school. So with that, Madam President, I will step aside and we'll see if there's any public comment. If there is none, then we will.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? State your name for us, please.
My name is Herman Brent Curry, and my question is, you say it's for Daly and Water School and Munger, and we're glad to see that maintenance is being performed on these schools. So that's one of the issues we're facing with Hawthorne. Seems like in the past, the maintenance was not kept up, and now we have an issue with a lot of projects need to be done. So I'm in favor of keeping these schools up to date and keep them safe and keep them what our kids need before they can go forward with their education. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions?
Curry touches on a great topic, is we have a 20-year plan. We have a lot of buildings throughout the district. We need to be doing work on them every year, much like the roof improvements on these two buildings really are to protect our assets. The building have leaky roofs. So, with that, Madam President, I would ask that we close the hearing and resume the regular meeting, and then we'll address the two resolutions.
Okay, I adjourn the hearing and reopen the regular board meeting.
Okay, the first resolution confirms the lease that's required and allows the building corp to issue bonds and the two entities work in coordination with each other. So with that, Madam President, I would ask for board approval of this first resolution.
Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion?
So make sure I'm reading this right, the leases are not to exceed $2 million with respect to each school?
Annual payment. So
Annual payment.
that's a high estimate. They use a fairly high estimate on interest rates.
Yeah.
And then when we sell the bonds, interest rate has always historically been much lower. Good question.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. And then the final resolution is granting appropriation authority so that we can spend the proceeds from the bonds on the improvements that are done. With that, Madam President, I would ask for a motion.
So moved. I'm sorry.
Is
I
there
take
a
that back.
motion? Is there a motion, Doug?
Yes, I have a motion now.
Okay. Second. Is there any discussion?
Maybe this is like a question that isn't relevant, but in the event that a study would come back or things would change in the district and we do these bonds and we have to make decisions in the future about buildings or not buildings or whatever, what happens if we approve these bonds now?
So we have debt that's falling off, so these will have a zero impact on our tax rate this time, and it's part of the 20-year plan as we look at all of our buildings and then the end of the life cycle items in those buildings. Our intent is Mr. Giannaci and I have had discussions with the administrative team. We're going to look to do 2 or 3 projects per year, trying to make updates to buildings across the district. We are in the process of debt planning and managing our tax rate. To do that.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, Kevin. Okay, now it is opportunity for the audience to speak. If you haven't filled out the little white form, please get one from Dora so that you have the opportunity to speak. When you come up, state your name, your address, and your relationship to the district. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Michelle? Troutman.
I'm sorry, I'm coming up. Hey, my name is Michelle Troutman. My relationship to the corporation is that I'm a teacher at Hawthorne, for the last 9 years. I wanted to, repeat some of the information that was given during the work session, because I feel like maybe a lot of people were not aware of what's happening with the redistricting. It was a surprise to me. So for, and if I'm wrong, please tell me, for our Hawthorne students, 335 of our students will be going to Roosevelt, 66 of our students will be going to Munger, and 96 to Bailey. As far as the Roosevelt students, it was a surprise to me that 190 of the students from Roosevelt will be shifted over to Mary Beth. And then also the Washington Gardens community will be split up, 34 to Riverview, 16 to Beardsley, and then 60 of those Washington Gardens students will go with the Roosevelt students to that. My concern is that we had 3 community meetings, one at Hawthorne, one at Roosevelt, and one at Mary Beth. I attended all 3, and I don't feel like the parents for Roosevelt were notified of this, that their school would be affected very seriously, just like Hawthorne. And so I'm wondering why that has not been mentioned and when it will be mentioned to the Roosevelt students. Because once again, Roosevelt is part of our Southside community, and they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, just like our Hawthorne families. One of my thoughts is that since there are so many students going over to Roosevelt, 190, then why can't we send some of the Roosevelt teachers over to Mary Beth with the Roosevelt students? Because Dr. Tallheimer told us, Hawthorne teachers, that he wanted us to follow our students and make sure there was a smooth transition for them. None of our students are going to Beth. So I would think it would be a good idea for some of those Roosevelt students or teachers to follow their students, and then maybe more teachers could follow their students to Roosevelt. Maybe all of us could. And then I was just also concerned about how we have 20 classrooms at Hawthorne right now, and you are looking to repurpose our school, but you are then going to put 18 preschool classes. So I don't understand. That.
Thank you, Michelle. Raquel?
Hola, mi nombre es Raquel Cortés. Yo vengo en representación de nuestra comunidad hispana. Nosotros tenemos muchos hijos, también en Hawthorne queremos decir que Hawthorne es muy importante para nosotros, muy.
So she is from Hawthorne, and I want to know if you have extra time since I have to take some time to translate for her. But she's a parent from Hawthorne Elementary School, and she wants to speak on behalf of the Hispanic parents. Okay.
Nosotros queremos decirles que la escuela es muy importante para la comunidad. Estamos dispuestos a apoyar en lo que sea necesario para salvar la escuela.
The school is very important to our community, and parents are willing to do a lot to try to save the school.
Bueno, si ustedes pueden hacer un estudio o un análisis 5 años atrás, ustedes pueden ver que ESCAR no tiene la misma población que tiene hoy. Y si ustedes se van al futuro, ESCAR tendrá mucho más población.
She said if you go back in 5 years and look at the population of Elkhart, how different it has changed in the past 5 years. So if you're looking at 5 years in the future, the population of Elkhart is going to be completely different as well.
¿Eso qué va a pasar? Las escuelas se van a llenar. ¿Qué va a pasar? Van a tener que abrir otra escuela, van a tener que invertir más dinero en vez de apoyar nuestra escuela hoy.
She said when that happens and the schools become overcrowded, then another school will need to be open. So it's better to just invest the money now in the school we do have than to later have to build a whole new school.
Como comunidad estamos dispuestos a hacer lo que sea necesario, pero por favor no nos cierren nuestra escuela. Es muy importante para nosotros, para nuestros hijos, para nuestros nietos y para toda la comunidad. Y que ustedes la cierran, pues no nos están escuchando a nosotros como comunidad ni como familia.
She said that this school is very important to us as a community, not just to us, but to our children, to our grandchildren. And if you guys close it, that shows that you are not listening to the parents of the school that are concerned.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Esperanza? Is there Esperanza?
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Esperanza y yo soy madre de familia. Ahí tengo 4 hijos, pero tengo 3 hijos ya mayores que fueron a la escuela Hampton. Y ahorita tengo una niña de 11 años y un nieto. Y yo les pido de favor, por favor que nos escuchen. Que esa escuela la necesitamos más los hijos, porque ellos ahí es una comunidad donde nos queda cerca y los niños a veces se van, los hermanos grandes agarran de la mano a los chiquitos. Ahí casi no hay bases. Entonces ellos necesitan, porque está cerca la escuela para todo ese barrio, esa comunidad. She's a parent at Alpha Community School. She has 4 kids that have come to there, including myself, that's my mom. She currently has her daughter there right now. She's a 6th grader there. And she said that a lot of kids walk there, and a lot of them ride the bus there, and that a lot of times older kids walk with the younger siblings to school because it's within walking distance, and that she really does not want the school to close. Y luego se me hace muy triste para todos los niños que van a separarlos de diferentes escuelas, porque todos los niños que viven por esta comunidad ya no se van a mirar porque desde pequeños están creciendo en esa misma escuela. Y yo pienso que para todos es un futuro para todos estos niños que van a la escuela Hampton. Por favor, les pido, por favor, que nos ayuden a nosotros también y que vean, porque ustedes también son padres y ustedes estarían lo mismo, estarían reuniéndose como ahorita lo estamos haciendo nosotros para salvar la escuela. She said that she feels bad for other kids that are going to be separated, because they have been going to their school since they were younger, and there's generations of families that have been going there since they were younger. And she knows that as parents, you guys should understand, because if it was the same way around, you guys would be doing the same thing for your children in their schools. Bueno, y es todo, y gracias.
Thank you. I think this is Genevieve. Is that right?
Correct.
We'll wait.
My name is Genevieve Hart. My former address is 729 Concord Avenue, just 2.5 blocks from Hawthorne School. My child attended Hawthorne in grades 2 through 6. I wish to read this letter to you. To the Elkhart School Board, from the Hawthorne community. We are deeply saddened by the possible closing of Hawthorne School as a K-6 building. You have been elected to represent our interests and serve us according to our diverse needs. We are trusting that you will talk with us and not to us. We are trusting that you will relay our concerns to Elkhart Community Schools. In many places in this country, school closures are happening only in the Black and Latino communities. We just didn't think this would be a possible thing happening here in Elkhart. Here are some of our concerns about closing Hawthorne K-6. We don't understand why the school system wants to move 510 of our children from a stable school like Hawthorne to others. We worry about our children's emotional health with this closing. They may experience grief or become disoriented. They will be torn apart from their friends and their teachers. We worry about our children's education. The school system has not adequately shown us how our children's education will be maintained or improved. We are concerned that, to our knowledge, our district school board member has not reached out to communicate with us. We have waited patiently and have heard nothing. We are concerned about how the school system communicates with us. We do not believe we have been given consistent, honest, and real answers. We felt intimidated at the first Hawthorne informational meeting by the presence of the police. It kept some of us from speaking. It humiliated our community. Our homeowners are concerned about declining property values with removal of a K-6 school in our neighborhood. We are all concerned about our neighborhood being destroyed because of this situation. The administration said that the closing of Hawthorne K-6 is purely due to finances and staffing. We have listed some of the things that are important to us to keep Hawthorne School K-6 open that you should consider. In our neighborhood, a school is a place of learning, a refuge for some of our children, and a place where the community gathers together. For us, family and community come first, and Hawthorne K-6 is the center of our community. Thank you for listening to our concerns.
Thank you. Brent Curry.
I am Brent Curry, and I am the 5th District City Councilman for this side, that part of Elkhart, and Hawthorne School is in the heart of my district. So many people have called me with some of the concerns that you just heard, and they wanted to make sure that all the concerns are heard before a vote is taken. And one of the main concerns is what's best for the kids. And as far as them getting a good education, that's number one. And they say that Hawthorne School is considered a failing school. Why are we sending the kids from one failing school to another failing school? If we're sending them from one failing school to another failing school, there's no benefit. So we should send them to other schools that are not failing, where they can get a better education. If Hawthorne's education is not good enough to raise the standards. And they're also concerned in this move that would happen, busing. Are the kids going to be bused? How are they going to get to school? And what are we going to do about keeping them safe, especially those that might have to walk to some of these other schools that they're not used to going to some of these other schools? And the other things that they were concerned about, they said, we don't have enough information about this whole plan yet. I know there was public meetings, but a lot of the residents said they don't have enough information to really make a decision whether they're for it or against it. And also, they were saying that this plan was put together by who? They were wondering how much input was actually put into this plan by the teachers and principals to make it a good plan. So I think we're going to need more information, and they call me a lot as a councilman. I told them to call you. I told them I don't have a vote in this matter, but I'm very concerned about what happens, and whatever happens, I hope it's good for our kids and good for Elkhart. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Vivian?
Hi, my name is Vivian Washington. My address is 242 Thorndale, right on the corner of Denham and Thorndale. I'm an alumni of Hawthorne. My children were alumni of Hawthorne. And there's so much in the community that we have so many children. I don't understand why you want to move over 500 children. There's enough in the community to keep that pool going for them. I think that the funding should be shared, not with the state and Munger, but also Hawthorne. I don't think that, I met a little girl today from Hawthorne that I came in with, and I can she's here because she wants her school to stay. And I think that, the city of Elkhart is moving children too far away from where their homes are. You have so many children walking to school, and to bus them so far away, I just think that there can be a way to save the person.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the cards I had, so we'll hear from the superintendent now.
one of the points I wanted to raise was to discuss with the board, and we can set a date for this or look at this for an informational meeting or two to be held next week to share these boundaries and answer these questions, share information about pre-K, and provide some further information. So I've talked with my team, and we're ready to have additional informational meetings, sharing the information like we shared this evening, and to answer questions, and can do that next week. So I would look to set that date with the board's help and find times that would work so that we can be there to share information, hear concerns, answer questions as well. One other thing that I would want to share is that as we've put out the request for proposal for the study, one of the questions that some of you were asking was, how long might a study like this take to do for the scope of what you were all asking? And as I've spoken to a couple vendors who have inquired about doing the process, as I've answered their questions about the RFP and done those things, a couple of them, I turned around and asked them and said, just as a ballpark, how long of a timeline is doing a study like this? And in a couple different instances, they've said 6 to 8 months. So if we did the study, or approve the study in April, as we've indicated we would, and have somebody starting by the latter part of April, early May, we would be looking at 6 to 8 months, at least in the estimation of the couple vendors that have inquired as to just generally what that would be. So I'm just sharing that information with you, that their perspective is that.
Did they, in their information to you, did they break it down by each section, or they?
No, I mean, they're just initially reading through it and asking questions and wanting clarity on just some of the pieces and what we were looking for. But in their estimation, from having done this work before, they're saying 6 to 8 months in various ways. So others may come in on a shorter timeline, but just in the people that I've spoken with, I thought it was important to share that with you since you had been asking, and we were thinking maybe 4 months, 5 months, but it does sound like from at least these two vendors that I spoke to, they're saying longer than that. So.
I have a question. Wait a minute.
We've not taken questions at this time, so when the meetings are set. When will the meeting? So,
We would be, I'll work with the board on those meetings and try to get those next week.
so how, I guess she's asking, how will the public find out what the meeting?
We'll advertise them places, get it out to the media, do social media, communicate directly with families from the schools impacted. That's all I have.
Does the board have anything?
Yeah, I do. This coming weekend, 11th to the 13th, our Air Force ROTC is going off to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base down by Dayton, Ohio for drill competition this weekend. And I am one lucky person because I'm going with them. I think there'll be about 20 kids and 2 buses, so I'm excited about that. Also, the following weekend on the Saturday, March 19th, the Air Force Junior ROTC has their winter military formal. And my wife and I have been to that twice, and it's very impressive to see 200 students dressed in their blues and their gowns and stuff like that. And it's amazing how much work Major Dorman and Sergeant Rutledge put into these kids in areas that you wouldn't think that these guys would be doing. And it's a lot of it's etiquette, believe it or not. They teach these kids how to dance. They teach them how to act. They teach them how to shake a hand. It's pretty impressive. So if you ever get a chance to do that, please do. That's all I have.
In honor of International Women's Day, here's to strong women. May we know them. We saw a lot of them here tonight. May we be them, and may we raise them.
If there's no other comments, meeting adjourned.